Hello aspirants, welcome you all to Believers IAS Academy. In today's topic of the day discussion, we will be discussing an important current affairs topic related to the household savings under stress. So now, what is this household saving and why is it under stress? And this we will be studying with respect to both the country and also the household, or let's say the people, the consumers, right? And this comes ahead, or let's say even before the union budget is yet to be announced, and this makes a very important event, or let's say an important milestone for the government to do something about this particular problem. And this problem is not a very simple problem because of the very serious condition that has been created because the household is not saving, or let's say the savings that the household should have or which earlier had has been drastically reducing, right? So this is what the today's topic is. So of course we will be covering about the various reports, the statistics, the data and everything. So let's begin. And if we have to once again see as to why this is in news, this is because of the recent data which was released by the RBI's Financial Stability Report. It is also called as the RBI's Financial Stability Report, and the annual report of 2024. Once again, it is by the RBI itself, which points out the emerging stress in household finances. And this is more alarming because despite India's stable macroeconomic indicators such as the GDP growth and also the inflation management, still on the other hand, right, contrastingly, we have seen that the household finances is under a huge stress, means it is shrinking. So what are these household finances, or let's say what is the household savings? So simply to understand, it is that money which any household saves for, or let's say saves in the liquid form for an unprecedented event, or let's say for something that they think would disturb or would create a or let's say could create a disharmony in their daily expenses going forward, right? So it is that safety financial net any household keeps for itself. Okay, so that is your basic understanding about household savings. So now, what is the issue with this household savings? If you have to see, while India's macroeconomic stability remains intact, India has made sure that the GDP growth rate and also the inflation is all taken care of. But also, on the other hand, a structural shift is underway in the economy. So, what is it? Households are saving less, borrowing more, and increasingly financing consumption through credit, indicating a gradual transfer of economic risk from the state to households. So basically, what is the consumers doing? So when I'm talking about the households, I also can call them consumers, because a large part of consumption happens at the private consumption. I mean to say the households, right? Consumers, of course, there are a lot of different kind of consumers, but the majority part of the consumption mostly happens in the households. And these households, in order to consume more and more, how are they financing themselves? The problem is they are borrowing more, right? They are borrowing more, and also this even becomes worse when they are even taking, or let's say using credit, correct? So it could be even in the form of credit card, or even probably by borrowing a loan, correct, which as we discussed earlier. And this is a very problematic situation because the economic risk from the state has now transferred to the households, and this trend raises concerns about the sustainability of growth and the financial stability, because how would the country ensure sustainability of growth when the major part, or let's say major pillar of the entire economic structure, which is the household, is already trembling, is already weak? Because if something were to happen, let's say any global shock, okay, any global shock, so obviously that would pretty much affect the interest rates in the country, which would also affect the prices and let's say a sudden inflation, a very high inflation. Now, how will the households be able to manage that when they do not even have a safety net? And in the worst case, let's say something bad were to happen to the households, let's say for the same global shock, or let's say maybe another pandemic were to come, and let's say there's an event of job loss, correct? So a household which has at least four people, let's say the main pillar, main person who is earning, lost his job, and since he doesn't even have any safety net with him, so what would he do? Correct. So these are all the problems, and this is the biggest major issue, and hence it is very important to talk about it. Anyway, even before that, let's also see the highlights of these reports that they have given. It has said that net household financial savings recovered to 7.6% of GDP in the fourth quarter of 2024 and 25 after falling to 3 to 4% of GDP in the previous quarter, indicating high volatility. And the household debt rose from 36% of GDP in 2021 to 41.3% of GDP by March 2025. Means almost, if you see that the household debt, which in 2021 was earlier in 36%, has right now drastically increased to 41.3% as a part of GDP by March 2025. That is also one of the alarming indication. Next is the private consumption, which contributes nearly 60% of GDP, as we discussed. The private consumption, especially in terms of what the households consume, they contribute to 60% of GDP. And this the private consumption contributing nearly 60% of GDP remains stable largely due to increased reliance on credit rather than strong income growth. So what does the report has to say is that the private consumption, which is almost 60% of GDP, seems to be stable, right? Seems to be stable because the household, whatever it has to buy, or let's say whatever it has to consume, right? It is consuming, or it is buying that not from a steady source of income, because a household, if it needs to buy something, it needs income. And the report says that the household is consuming or buying, or let's say the consumption is pretty much stable because the household is anyway consuming. But the problem here is that it is not consuming because of the income that it is generating by probably putting something to the society, or let's say by putting something to the economy, by returning back to the economy in terms of employment, but rather what is the household doing? It is borrowing credit, right? So it is using credit. Like now the credit card facility has been increased. People to access the credit, or let's say the credit access to people has been made more easier. So now whatever household is consuming, most of the things has been credited by credit cards, or let's say in general terms we can consider borrowing. So now what is the problem? The household is not relying on a steady source of income, but rather is completely relying on credit, which means it is borrowing, and with whatever money it has, rather it could have invested for some asset creation, but no, they are mostly using it for private consumption, right? So this is one of the biggest problem. And also the report says that household financial liabilities are growing faster than assets, compressing the net savings, as we discussed, and rapid expansion of unsecured retail credit, especially the personal loans and credit cards, has increased household vulnerability that we have done. And fiscal consolidation has prioritized capital expenditure, while limited fiscal space has reduced short-term income support, shifting risks towards the households, right? So this is what we understood about the shift which has been transferred from the state to the households. So what are the implications? So for the means part, this is very important to understand. The number one implication is the macroeconomic vulnerability. See, the lower and volatile household savings, that the present situation, it reduces the availability of domestic funds for investment. So now the household, rather than spending on asset creation or asset generation, it is rather spending its money or whatever the wealth it has on personal consumption. And now this shortens their funds for some active investment, and also this increases the dependence on foreign capital inflows, right? This is a very huge problem, and this exposes the entire economy to global financial shocks and can worsen the current account deficit, and it will even make it even more worse during periods of capital outflows. Next implication is the financial system stress. First is the Rising household indebtedness, particularly through unsecured loans, heightens default risks during economic slowdowns, and this at the same time weaker growth in household deposits reduces banks' access to stable low cost funding, potentially increasing systematic risks in the financial sector. So these are the two major implications. If you can keep it in mind, that's really good, and this is very important. And anyway, that is all for this particular topic. We have discussed about the present situation and what is the issue, and you just don't have to mostly worry about the data and everything. Just understand the issue, understand the topic, and just also it is very important to even know its further implications as well. So anyway, that's all for this particular video. Even before we wind up, let's solve one prelims practice question. With reference to household savings and debt trends in India, consider the following statements. Declining household financial savings can increase India's reliance on foreign capital inflows. Rapid growth in unsecured retail lending increases systematic risk in the banking sector. And number three, greater household participation in equity markets always reduces risks for banks by lowering dependence on deposits. Which of the statements given are correct? So use the comment section, leave your answers below. This is all for this particular video. Signing off, this is Madan Gopal. Have a beautiful day.